Good morning, everyone. This is the Hidebound Convivium, and today is going to be a more podcast style episode and a brief discussion on recent scandals in the Roman Catholic Church and some takeaways, I think, for the faithful. So, I'm not going to spend this episode recounting the phenomenal reporting work that has already been done on the issue, but suffice to say, the whole scandal starts really with Cardinal McCarrick, the former Archbishop of Washington D.C., I believe, and he was removed from his post after credible allegations surfaced that he had abused minors, even though there had been rumors of McCarrick abusing seminarians or sleeping with seminarians for many years now. So the McCarrick uh, allegations were the first thing that came to light, and then following that, it was mostly kicked off by the. Well, I should back up. Actually, it was less prominent in American news circles, but there was controversy in Chile regarding a very similar set of circumstances as to what we're facing in the United States. And then, in a similar vein, there was the Pennsylvania grand jury report that alleged that there were credible allegations that, let's see, it was over 70 years, thousands of cases of abuse, or over 1,000 cases of abuse by 300 priests. So between basically 1940 and the present day was the span of the allegations. Now, obviously, the Pennsylvania grand jury reports were inflated by the media, who do have a natural bias against the Catholic Church, which does not excuse the abuses that were detailed in the report, but you have to call a spade a spade. At the same time, the Pennsylvania grand jury report kicked off a new wave of damage control within the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, who were eager to demonstrate that the protections that they had put in place in 2002, following the Boston scandals, had been effective in reducing abuse. And frankly, we just don't have the numbers to know whether or not that is actually the case. Although it seems perhaps likely that it is the case. Really, the issue that we're looking at here is mainly the abuse of seminarians and teenage boys by homosexual priests. This seems priests and hierarchs. So this seems to be the major issue that is emerging and why it's become a lightning rod for the conservative press. There are elements of the church and the media who want to downplay the effects of homosexuality in the abuse scandal. However, it seems very clear to me, at least, that homosexuality in the clergy, combined with a widespread acceptance of heterodox views, has probably been a large contributing factor to the abuse scandal thus far. So, following the Pennsylvania grand jury report, obviously there was a lot of damage control that was being done, and then the Vigano letter hit, the 11-page report on how members of the upper hierarchy have also been complicit in covering up sexual abuse, sexual misconduct by priests. Vigano he is the former nuncio to the United States from the Vatican, and he alleged that Pope Benedict had actually ordered McCarrick out of public ministry, and that Pope Francis had rescinded this order. So he's implicating the Holy Father in the scandals that Francis himself has said he has zero tolerance for. And there are also higher bishops, for example, who have been implicated. I think the Chilean Bishop Mariadega is one good example. But I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the Vigano letter, because there have been internet flame wars for the past couple days between Catholic news agencies, those with a conservative, those with a liberal bent, trying to inflate perhaps the Vigano statement or to diminish it, respectively. And so, what I really want to talk about is the effect that this is going to have on the church as a whole, and maybe some misguided ways of looking at the scandal. First thing I want to do is talk about apostasy from the Catholic Church, specifically in the person of Rod Dreher. Now, Rod Dreher is a writer for the American Conservative. He recently wrote a book called The Benedict Option about sort of post-Christian Christian living in the United States. And Rod Dreher was a very vocal journalist in the 2002 scandal when he was a Catholic. And the scandal apparently broke his faith, and he realized that, or he believes that he no longer needed to be in communion with Rome, that his salvation did not depend on it, and so he apostatized and joined the Orthodox Church. I'm not judging Rod for his decision. I'm just using him as an example for the kind of thing I think faithful Catholics need to avoid, and that is this tendency to want to jump ship. For conservative Catholics, you want to jump ship to the Orthodox Church, which seems less tainted by the stain of the abuse and less heterodox than certain elements of the Catholic Church. And then if you're a more liberal Catholic or maybe a more marginal Catholic, you might want to abandon the faith altogether or sort of move on to a more loosey-goosey Protestant denomination. And so all I want to say on that matter is that the reason that these sort of scandals don't touch Protestantism as much, obviously, is because it is decentralized. And so when the Protestant movement is decentralized, it does not allow for members of the hierarchy, for example, to commit systemic abuse for this long. So that is an advantage, in a way, of the the non-existent hierarchy within Protestant churches. But I would say that abuse of seminarians and abuse of children, while perhaps not as widespread in Protestant churches, because Protestantism is still actually a smaller branch of Christianity than Catholicism, and in general, just by number of adherents, there is abuse within Protestant churches, and perhaps it goes maybe more unnoticed because of the decentralized nature of Protestant churches. So it's really not an issue of a hierarchy or having an organization. It's more of an issue of human evil, I think. And the same applies to the Orthodox Church. When you jump ship and go to the Orthodox Church, first of all, what you're betting on is that the Orthodox churches do not also have a similar track record of covering things up. And now I'm not alleging that they do. I'm just saying that if the same scandals were to plague the Orthodox Church, where were you to go now? Because the Orthodox Church is also not cleared of certain blemishes. And there are problems within the Orthodox Church, definitely, for sure, especially during the communist era, when communists were infiltrating the Orthodox churches due to their obviously their geographic location. Another thing I want to point out is that this is definitely a problem of heterodox belief. The only way that we get to a point where the hierarchs of the Catholic Church are behaving in such a manner is when they no longer espouse belief in the doctrines that they themselves are, essentially, it is their job to transmit. I mean, there has been much hay made of Francis's controversial statements on, for example, whether hell exists or not. And I would wager that these heterodox beliefs are very common among Catholic hierarchs. Maybe not the majority of Catholic hierarchs, but certainly a large subset. And this is nothing new. For example, I believe it was the Arian heresy that had captured many bishops had been captured by the Arian heresy, or maybe it was the Manichaean heresy. I can't remember exactly, but there were many bishops in the past, in even early Christianity, within several centuries of Christ, that had been captured by certain heresies, and there have been much bigger scandals within the church. There has been, in the Middle Ages, there were periods of several different individuals claiming the status of popes. So you had popes and anti-popes, and it was a raw deal. It was not very good. And so at this point, we have an intact hierarchy. We just know that some members of the hierarchy are compromised. And we know that this is a problem because right practice stems largely from right belief. And if you fail to have right belief, how can you have right practices? Because people will try to harmonize what they do in their own personal lives with what they personally believe. Because human beings don't particularly like cognitive dissonance. So either the behavior will modify or the beliefs will modify. And it's much easier to modify beliefs, especially when you're already ensconced in a organization that will patronistically provide for you for the rest of your life. So that, I think, is a large part of the reason why there are heterodox hierarchs. Another reason, of course, is that some of these hierarchs, like McCarrick, when they get into positions of power, will start to groom people like themselves to take over. McCarrick's his dear Lord, the gentleman who took the position that McCarrick vacated, Donald Wuerl, he is in a very similar vein as McCarrick. They seem to be cut of the same cloth. And the problem is McCarrick was, as Vigano alleges, was involved in making appointments in the United States. And so there is a real fear that these heterodox hierarchs will start to stack the Catholic hierarchy with individuals like themselves. And so this sort of cancer within the church will replicate itself. So before I go, I want to talk about solutions. And I don't have a lot of good ones. I'm going to be honest. Now, I remember listening to a recent stream that the Distributist did on the abuse crisis. And I didn't listen to the whole thing, unfortunately. But I did seize on one aspect that he talked about. And he said something to the effect of, where do I go to join a Churchmen for the Inquisition group? Where do I sign up? Where do we petition? And I think there's some interesting, that it's an interesting idea. And naturally, the way the Inquisition was set up in the Middle Ages, you needed papal approval. However, I think if Francis was to be serious about clearing up these scandals, then we could persuade him perhaps to open up a type of inquisition that would be perhaps chaired by the laity, or at least have a large portion of lay people involved, because that is the most important thing. When the hierarchy is compromised, the lay people have the onus is on them to reaffirm orthodoxy. And frankly, another problem is that a lot of the laity have fallen into the same traps as the hierarchs. A lot of it is that we get the hierarchy that we deserve. But this interesting solution, this quote unquote churchmen for the Inquisition, it's going to have to be something like that. And we must, as always, pray for our Holy Mother Church that she may be cleansed of this affliction. However, we cannot stand idly by and do nothing. The Lord calls us into action. And I think this is the this is the element of Christian faith which has been lacking in the recent scandal, and I think it's telling how much the hierarchs will tell the laity to pray and to contemplate and to spend time discerning, because the more time that they do this, the less time that they have to act. So what any good hierarch would be telling the laity is, don't just pray and act. And that, I think, is the root of true Christian heroism, is when you are beseeching God for aid, but then you're going out and doing his work rather than just sitting idly by. It's better to do both, and it's perhaps more effective to do both. And so, as I get to the end of this discussion, I realize I don't have a lot of concrete solutions for the crisis. And I've been speaking mainly to an audience of like-minded believers. But for those of you who are not Catholic, so Orthodox or Protestant or some other type of Christian denomination, I ask that you pray for the Catholic Church. It's the largest denomination of Christianity in the world, and if it were to collapse, which I don't think it will, but if it were to collapse, it would be calamitous for Christianity worldwide. And for those of you who are not believers, I ask that you have patience with faithful Catholics when they try to explain the deep heartbreak that is inherent in the type of betrayal that the highest officials in our church have perpetrated on the faith, on the laity. They do real violence to the Catholic Church when they do these types of things, not only when they commit the crimes and when they cover them up, but when they create an atmosphere wherein this is acceptable behavior or expected behavior. And so that's really all I can give you guys today, and I'll have probably more structured content coming up in the near future. This is sort of a more rambly talk concerning the scandal. It's an issue that touches me, touches my heart deeply. And there is a kind of impotence that is inherent in a lot of the Catholic laity, where they just want to know what it is they can do, where they can direct funds. And so if any ambitious Catholics are out there, ambitious lay people, and you want to start an organization to begin to rid the church of these types of problems, then I beseech you, do it, and do it now, because this is the time for reform and the time for action. This is a time of great trials, and this is a time of great saints, when people of true godliness will be formed and be tested. But anyway, have a good rest of the day. This has been Colby Anderson for the Hidebound Convivium.